I was updating the quarterly revenue forecast when Naomi slammed a stack of papers on my desk like she was setting fire to a dumpster. Not a smile. Just dropped the rejection letter in front of me, pivoted sharply, and clicked back to her corner office, heels stabbing the carpet with each step. I froze. The words, "request denied," were stamped in blood red across my remote work proposal. 3 months of research, benchmarks, and productivity metrics murdered by rubber stamp. The client waiting on our Zoom call cleared his throat. I muted myself, heart hammering as I struggled to process what just happened. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sorry about that, I managed, forcing my voice to stay level. Small office emergency. But this wasn't small. This was career suicide by management ego. When I looked closer at the letter, I saw Naomi's handwritten note. In the margin, real teams work face to face. This isn't negotiable. Underneath, a reminder about the upcoming staff meeting where my team's Q3 targets would be reevaluated. Translation: justify your existence or else. The warning signs had been flashing for weeks. First came the passive-aggressive emails about my unusual hours, though my team consistently outperformed every other division. Then the surprise visits to my desk whenever I stepped away for more than 15 minutes. But I never expected a public execution of my career aspirations, especially not during the biggest client call of the quarter. I finished the presentation on autopilot, somehow navigating through 42 slides of growth projections while my mind calculated escape velocities. The client seemed impressed, asking about implementation timelines, but all I could think about was the ticking clock on my professional dignity. After the call, I sat there staring at the rejection letter, my reflection distorted in my monitor's dark edges. 3 years at Vertex Dynamics. 3 years of canceled vacations, midnight troubleshooting, and building a client portfolio that increased company revenue by 37%. And this was my reward? A public dismissal of a reasonable request backed by solid performance. Data? Tough break, Maya, whispered Devin from the neighboring cubicle. Naomi's been on a rampage since the board meeting. Something about traditional workplace values and eliminating flexible arrangements. He slid a coffee across to me like it was contraband. Everyone's walking on eggshells. I didn't respond, just nodded and sipped the too-bitter coffee. My mind was already elsewhere, scanning through options, calculating risks, processing the seismic shift under my feet. I opened my laptop and began typing, not a resignation letter, not yet, but something that would prove more valuable, a comprehensive list of every client relationship I'd built, every project I'd salvaged, and every revenue stream I'd personally secured. The afternoon crawled by in a fog of simmering anger and strategic planning. Colleagues passed by my desk with sympathetic glances but kept their distance, as if my career disappointment might be contagious. I didn't blame them. In Naomi's corporate kingdom, association with the disgraced was a risky proposition. At 4:47 p.m., my phone buzzed with a calendar notification, all hands meeting, mandatory attendance, 9 a.m. tomorrow. The subject line read, organizational restructuring and renewed focus. The corporate equivalent of gathering villagers to witness a public flogging. I slipped out before 5 o'clock, avoiding the elevator where I might encounter Naomi or any of her executive disciples. In the parking garage, I sat in my car for 10 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at nothing. Not crying, not panicking, just processing. Calculating. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I updated my LinkedIn profile. Not subtle tweaks, but a complete overhaul highlighting client success stories, revenue impacts, and specialized skills. I sent connection requests to 3 former clients who had repeatedly tried to poach me. I dug out business cards from competitors who had slipped them to me at industry conferences with whispered invitations. Then I drafted a simple, powerful email template. As my role at Vertex Dynamics shifts, I wanted to personally thank you for our professional relationship. Your business has been instrumental to my team's success, and I've valued our collaboration immensely. I'll be exploring new opportunities aligned with modern workplace philosophies, but wanted to express my gratitude for your partnership these past years. Not quite a goodbye. Not explicitly soliciting. Just planting seeds. By midnight, I had individual versions crafted for each of my 12 major clients, scheduled to send automatically at 10:30 a.m. tomorrow, precisely 90 minutes after Naomi's restructuring announcement would begin. Timing mattered. Context mattered more. I slept surprisingly well for someone whose career was balanced on a knife's edge. Perhaps because, for the first time in years, I wasn't reacting to someone else's agenda. I was creating my own. The next morning arrived with steel gray skies and a forecast of thunderstorms, pathetic fallacy for the corporate drama about to unfold. I dressed deliberately, my highest quality suit, the one reserved for client pitches and industry panels. Not for Naomi's benefit, but for my own psychological armor. The office hummed with nervous energy. Clusters of employees whispered near the coffee machine, conversations dying as I approached. In the conference room, chairs were arranged theater-style facing the presentation screen, transforming colleagues into audience members for whatever spectacle Naomi had planned. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us. I chose a seat in the middle row, not hiding at the back but not placing myself in the firing line either. Strategic positioning. Devon slid in beside me, coffee cup clutched like a talisman. "Heard anything?" he whispered. I shook my head, attention fixed on my phone where a notification showed 3 replies already to connection requests I'd sent last night. Speed was revealing. At precisely 9:03, Naomi entered with her executive entourage. Power move, making everyone wait just long enough to establish dominance. She wore what I privately called her termination suit, charcoal gray with blood-red accents. Another bad sign. "Good morning, team," she began, voice projecting artificial warmth. "Today marks an exciting new chapter for Vertex Dynamics as we realign our organizational structure to better meet market demands." Corporate speak for brace for impact. What followed was 27 minutes of carefully crafted propaganda, charts showing theoretical productivity increases in collaborative environments, case studies of companies that had successfully transitioned to traditional workspaces, and repeatedly emphasized phrases like face-to-face synergy and physically present leadership. Then came the hammer, effective immediately: all flexible work arrangements are terminated. Remote work requests will no longer be considered for any position below director level. Murmurs rippled through the room. At least 60% of the staff had some form of flexibility built into their schedules: parents with childcare responsibilities, caregivers for elderly relatives, people with medical needs or brutal commutes. Additionally, Naomi continued, silencing the whispers with a raised hand, "We'll be implementing new productivity monitoring systems on all company devices to ensure alignment with our collaborative vision." Translation: surveillance. Finally, we're excited to announce quarterly team performance reviews with competitive elimination protocols. The bottom-performing team each quarter will undergo restructuring to better serve company needs. Translation: departmental Hunger Games. My phone vibrated silently in my pocket. Then again. And again. The scheduled emails to clients had gone out 30 minutes early. Someone had changed the meeting duration in the calendar. Not ideal timing, but perhaps fortuitous. Naomi's gaze swept the room, lingering momentarily on me. Questions? Silence stretched for 5 uncomfortable seconds before a brave soul in technical operations raised his hand. "What about existing flexible arrangements for people with documented medical needs?" Naomi's smile tightened. "Case-by-case evaluation, of course. But our expectation is full-time physical presence. Vertex Dynamics needs everyone rowing in the same direction, in the same boat." More questions followed, about implementation. Timelines, exceptions, monitoring limitations. I remained silent, watching faces around the room transition from shock to resignation to quiet anger. Meanwhile, my phone continued its silent vibration Morse code against my thigh. The outside world was responding while Naomi constructed her elaborate cage. When the meeting finally concluded, I didn't immediately stand. I watched Naomi hold court near the door, accepting congratulatory nods from her inner circle while avoiding eye contact with the rank-and-file employees filing past. Corporate theater at its finest. I checked my phone: 7 email responses, 3 text messages, and 2 voicemails, all from clients. I opened the first voicemail, from the CFO of our largest account. "Maya, just got your email. Disturbing news. Call me immediately. We need to discuss our contract renewal in light of these changes." The second voicemail was equally urgent. From a tech startup founder whose business we'd helped scale. "Hey Maya, what the hell is happening over there? Your email sounded like a goodbye, and now I'm hearing rumors about Vertex going full draconian? Call me. We need to talk about our options." I slipped out of the conference room as Naomi was deep in conversation with HR, making my way back to my desk with deliberate normalcy. I had approximately 30 minutes before the client response wildfire reached Naomi's awareness. 30 minutes. To decide my next move. Devon appeared at my cubicle entrance, face pale. "They're cutting my entire team's remote Fridays. My wife works weekends, that was the only full day I had with my kids." I nodded sympathetically, mind racing. "What? Will you do? He ran a hand through his hair. No idea. Start looking, I guess. But in this market. That's when inspiration struck. Not just an exit strategy for myself, but something bigger. What if you didn't have to look? I asked, voice low. Devin blinked. What do you mean? I need to make some calls. Meet me for lunch? The cafe 2 blocks over, not the building cafeteria. He looked confused but nodded. Sure. Noon? Perfect. For the next hour, I returned client calls from an empty meeting room, keeping my voice measured but honest. Yes, major organizational changes. No, I don't agree with the direction. Yes, I'm exploring options. Of course, client relationships would remain my priority regardless of where I land. By 11:30, a pattern had emerged. Not a single client was pleased about Vertex's new direction. 3 explicitly stated they'd followed me from my previous company. 5 asked if I had non-compete clauses in my contract. 2 offered to connect me with their networks. And 1, Riker Technical Solutions, our second largest client, asked a question that changed everything. Maya, said CEO Eliza Riker, what would it take for you to set up your own consultancy? Because I'd rather contract directly with you than deal with whatever regime change is happening at Vertex. I paused, heart racing. That's an interesting question. It's a serious one, Eliza continued. You've managed our account flawlessly. For 2 years. You know our systems, our culture, our goals. Vertex just provides the infrastructure, which honestly, seems to be becoming more obstacle than asset. I'd need to consider legal implications, resource requirements. Consider quickly, she said. Our contract with Vertex is up for renewal in 45 days. I'd rather redirect that budget to someone who values modern work approaches. By noon, I had the outline of a plan. Not fully formed, still dangerous and uncertain, but a plan nonetheless. I met Devin at the cafe, choosing a corner table away from windows facing our office building. You look different, he observed. As I sat down. Calmer, somehow. I'm leaving Vertex, I said simply. Today is my last day. His eyes widened. That was fast. You already have another offer? Not exactly. I leaned forward. I'm starting my own consultancy. Remote first, results focused, without the corporate surveillance theater. Devin nearly choked on his water. Just like that? You need clients, infrastructure, legal. I have interest from 7 current clients willing to follow me. Possibly more by end of day. And I need a team. He stared, realization dawning. Me? You and possibly others. The ones Naomi is casually discarding because they prioritize work-life integration over physical presence. Maya, that's incredibly risky. Riskier than staying? How long before the quarterly, competitive elimination, targets your team? How many more family days are you willing to sacrifice because Naomi reads some article about spontaneous office collaboration? Devin was silent, calculating his own risk equations. Finally, he asked, what would you need from me? Your client knowledge, technical expertise, and complete discretion for the next 72 hours. I'll handle the business formation and client transition. You identify who else might join us, quietly. And compensation? I smiled. Base salary matching Vertex, plus 20%. Full remote flexibility. Quarterly profit sharing. His eyebrows shot up. Can you afford that? With the clients I'm bringing? Easily. Vertex's overhead is astronomical compared to what we'll run. By the time we returned to the office, Devin was cautiously on board, and I had 2 more client calls scheduled for the afternoon. The momentum was building, but so was the risk. Eventually, someone would notice the unusual client activity. That someone was Alan from Sales Operations, who stopped by my desk at 2:17 p.m. with a forced casual demeanor that immediately triggered my internal alarms. Hey Maya, seeing some weird client activity flags in the system. Bunch of your accounts. Requesting contract reviews simultaneously. Some kind of coordinated audit? I maintained eye contact, voice level. Year-end budget planning probably. Many of them operate on similar fiscal calendars. Alan nodded, not believing me for a second. Sure, makes sense. Just unusual to see 8 contract review requests hit within a 90-minute window. Especially after Naomi's announcement. So they were monitoring client communications more closely than I'd anticipated. Timeline compression required. I'll check in with them, I offered. Probably just coincidence. Great. Oh, and Naomi wants to see you. Her office, 15 minutes. The countdown clock accelerated. I quickly sent Devin a text, accelerating. Prepare extraction protocol. Our hastily developed code 4, back up your contacts and be ready to leave. I used those 15 minutes methodically, downloading key client deliverables to my personal cloud storage, only the work I'd personally created, nothing proprietary to Vertex, sending brief updates to my most supportive clients, and drafting a resignation letter that was professional, unemotional, and effectively immediate. Naomi's office embodied her leadership philosophy, glass-walled for maximum visibility, meticulously organized, and designed to place visitors at psychological disadvantage. Guest chairs set slightly lower than hers, harsh lighting from behind her desk, and nowhere to set personal items except in your uncomfortable lap. Maya, she greeted without looking up from her monitor. Close the door. I did so, settling into the intentionally awkward chair, back straight, portfolio balanced on my knees. Not defensive, not submissive. Naomi finally looked up, studying me with the evaluative gaze of someone appraising furniture. I've been reviewing your team's performance metrics. An unexpected opening gambit. I'd anticipated a direct confrontation about client communications. We consistently exceed targets, I replied. Last quarter we were 23% above projected revenue. Yes, the numbers are adequate. But I'm concerned about team cohesion and cultural alignment. Particularly yours. Ah, there it was. Cultural alignment, the corporate euphemism for not playing our political games correctly. I'm not sure I understand, I said, though I understood perfectly. Naomi leaned forward. 8 of your clients have suddenly requested contract reviews within hours of our new workplace policy announcement. That seems like an interesting coincidence. Clients value stability and predictability. Organizational changes naturally prompt questions. Questions you encouraged, perhaps. I maintain neutral expression. I've always provided transparent communication to my clients. It builds trust. Trust. Naomi rolled the word around. Like she was tasting something bitter. Trust is built through loyalty, Maya. Loyalty to the company that's invested in your career. I agree completely. My loyalty is reflected in the client relationships and revenue I've built for Vertex. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Let me be direct. If you're considering leveraging our client relationships for personal advantage, remember your non-compete agreement. Vertex will enforce it aggressively. Now we were getting to it. I opened my portfolio and removed the printed resignation letter, sliding it across her immaculate desk. My 2 weeks' notice, effective immediately. I'm happy to assist with transition planning. Naomi didn't touch the letter, just stared at it as if it might bite. This is rather sudden. Not really. The company's new direction doesn't align with my professional philosophy or work style. As you said, cultural alignment is important. Her expression hardened. You realize this timing makes it appear you're resigning to pursue our clients. I smiled slightly. I'm resigning because Vertex no longer offers the workplace environment where I can deliver my best results. My future plans are still developing. Technically true, if misleading about timeline. The non-compete applies to directly competitive services within a 100-mile radius, I finished for her. I've reviewed it carefully with legal counsel. This was a calculated bluff. I hadn't had time for proper legal consultation. But Naomi didn't need to know that. She studied me silently for several uncomfortable seconds. I could make this difficult. Withhold final paycheck pending investigation of client communication protocols. Challenge unemployment eligibility. You could, I acknowledged. But that might prompt certain clients to accelerate their contract reviews. Several have already expressed concerns about stability during this transition. Corporate Mexican standoff. We both knew she needed those client relationships more than she needed to punish me. HR will process your departure, she finally said. I expect all company property returned and client materials transitioned by end of day. I stood. Of course. Thank you for the opportunities Vertex has provided. As I reached the door, she added, the industry is smaller than you think. Maya. Word travels. I turned back with genuine smile. I'm counting on it. The next 3 hours passed in a blur of strategic activity. HR exit interview where I remained professional and nonspecific about future plans. IT security watching as I cleared my desk and surrendered my laptop. Brief, carefully worded goodbyes to trusted colleagues. And throughout, text messages coordinating with Devon and 3 other team members who had quietly agreed to join my exodus once legally safe to do so. By 6:30 p.m., I walked out of Vertex Dynamics for the last time, carrying a single box of personal items. No dramatic scene, no burning bridges publicly. Just a calm, measured departure while the real action happened invisibly through electronic channels. That night, from my apartment that now doubled as temporary headquarters, I registered a business entity, Adaptive Horizons Consulting. Secured domain names, created preliminary branding, and drafted operating agreements for my future team members. I set up secure communication channels and prepared client presentation decks outlining our service model, fully remote, outcome-focused, with transparent pricing that undercut Vertex by eliminating their bloated overhead. At 11:42 p.m., I received a text from Devon, and just sent all staff email about your departure. Claims, pursuing personal projects and wishes you well. Then announces she's personally taking over your client relationships to ensure continuity. Already scheduling meetings for tomorrow. I smiled at the predictability. Perfect. I replied. How many takers? 0 confirmations so far. 2 explicit declines citing scheduling conflicts. Others non-responsive. By morning, I had confirmed meetings with 5 former clients, all scheduled strategically before Naomi could get to them. By noon, I had verbal commitments from 3 representing nearly 40% of my previous portfolio's revenue. By day's end, the number had grown to 7 clients, and my inbox contained 6 resumes from Vertex employees hearing whispers about the new venture. Naomi's first direct response came 3 days later, a formally worded cease and desist letter from Vertex's legal department, claiming inappropriate solicitation of clients and violation of confidentiality agreements. It landed in my email with all the impact of a snowflake on warm ground. My lawyer, properly retained by then, responded with a point-by-point refutation, highlighting that clients had initiated contact, no proprietary materials had been used, and services offered were structurally different from Vertex's model. What Naomi didn't know, I'd anticipated this exact response and had already documented every client-initiated communication, preserved timestamp metadata, and gathered statements from clients willing to confirm they sought me out, not vice versa. 2 weeks into building Adaptive Horizons, my team had grown to 6 former Vertex employees working remotely across 3 time zones. Our client roster included 9 former Vertex accounts and 3 new referrals. Revenue projections already exceeded my most optimistic scenarios. Then came the call I'd been both expecting and dreading. Maya Chambers? An unfamiliar voice. When I answered. Speaking. This is Jeffrey Whitmore, board chairman at Vertex Dynamics. I maintained professional tone while my pulse accelerated. Hello, Mr. Whitmore. How can I help you? I think we should meet. In person. There are matters requiring discussion. I'd be happy to meet. May I ask the nature of these matters? My legal counsel would want to be informed if this relates to Vertex's cease and desist communication. A slight chuckle. Nothing so adversarial. This is a business conversation, not a legal one. Tomorrow, perhaps? My office downtown? I agreed. To meet Jeffrey Whitmore at his private office, not Vertex headquarters, a calculated power move I respected. Downtown high-rise, corner suite with views that reminded everyone exactly who controlled the chessboard. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in a custom-tailored suit that cost 1 month's rent, an investment in perception. The receptionist, a poised woman with silver-streaked hair, greeted me by name before I introduced myself. Mr. Whitmore is expecting you. Would you care for coffee? No, thank you, I replied, having already calculated that accepting refreshments created subtle psychological debt. Small details mattered in negotiations. She led me through double doors into an office that spoke volumes about its occupant. Minimalist furnishings of exceptional quality. Abstract art with subtle complexity. No family photos or personal touches visible, this space existed purely for business theater. Jeffrey Whitmore stood as I entered, a man in his 60s with athletic posture and eyes that evaluated constantly. He extended his hand with a smile that didn't quite reach those calculating eyes. Ms. Chambers. Thank you for making time. My pleasure, Mr. Whitmore. We settled into a seating area near floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. No desk between us, another tactical choice suggesting conversation between equals rather than confrontation. I'll be direct, he began, folding his hands. You've created quite the situation. I maintain neutral expression. I've started a business that addresses market needs. A business that acquired 9 Vertex clients representing 17 million in annual revenue within 3 weeks of your departure. So he had the exact numbers. Interesting that the board was tracking so precisely. Clients make their own choices based on service quality and value alignment, I replied evenly. Indeed they do. He studied me. Which raises questions about Vertex's current alignment. Our quarterly projections have been revised downward significantly. I remained silent, letting him fill the conversational void, a negotiation technique that often revealed more than questions. The board has concerns about Naomi's recent strategic decisions, he continued. Particularly the workplace policy. Changes that appear to have triggered this situation. Still I waited, watching his expression for microtells. We're considering leadership adjustments, he finally said, the carefully chosen phrase hanging in the air between us. Now we were getting to it. I nodded thoughtfully. Organizational direction is ultimately the board's responsibility. Indeed. He leaned forward slightly. Which brings me to the purpose of this meeting. We'd like to discuss your potential return to Vertex Dynamics. Though I'd anticipated this possibility, hearing it stated so directly sent a jolt through me. I kept my expression neutral, buying seconds to process. That's an unexpected suggestion, Mr. Whitmore, considering I've established a competing business. Not competing, precisely. Differently structured. He smiled. We've reviewed your service model. Remote first, results oriented, transparent pricing. Quite innovative, actually. Thank you. We believe Vertex could benefit from realigning with that approach. Under new leadership. The implication hung heavy in the air. They weren't just asking me back, they were offering something much larger. Are you suggesting I would replace Naomi? He nodded once. Chief Operations Officer initially, with clear succession path to CEO within 18 months. Naomi would transition to a strategic advisory role. Corporate speak for elegant demotion. Interesting proposition, I said carefully. Though I've committed to my team and clients at Adaptive Horizons. They could come too. Full team integration, guaranteed positions at equivalent or better. Compensation. He paused meaningfully. Speaking of compensation, we're prepared to offer a significant adjustment to your previous arrangement. Base salary increase of $150,000, plus equity position and performance incentives. The number hit like a thunderclap. More than double my previous salary. Life-changing money by most standards, though I kept my expression measured. That's a generous offer. It reflects your demonstrated value. Another calculated pause. And the cost of not having you. There it was, the real reason for this conversation. I wasn't just being recruited back, I was being contained. The board had calculated the financial impact of my departure and determined that buying me out was cheaper than competing against me. I'd need time to consider such a significant proposition. And there would be considerable details to address. Of course. He reached into his jacket, withdrawing a slim envelope. The formal offer, including preliminary terms. We'd welcome your counterproposal on any points requiring adjustment. I accepted the envelope without opening it. When would you need my decision? The board meets next Friday. Ideally before then. He stood, signaling the meeting's conclusion. I believe this could be beneficial for all parties, Ms. Chambers. Sometimes the most effective revolutions happen from within. I stood as, well, an interesting perspective. I'll consider it carefully. As the elevator descended, I finally allowed myself to process what had just happened. The board was effectively offering me Naomi's job, an enormous salary increase, and adoption of my business model, essentially validating everything I'd built while attempting to bring it back under their control. The question wasn't whether it was a good offer. The question was whether it was the right one. Outside the building, I called Devin immediately. How'd it go? He asked without preamble. They want me back. COO position, path to CEO. 150,000 more than before. His whistle carried clearly through the phone. Holy shit, Maya. They want all of us. The whole team, the business model, everything. And Naomi? Sidelined. Strategic advisory role. Devin was silent for a moment. Are you considering it? I need to think. Meet me at the usual place in an hour? Our usual place had quickly become a quiet cafe with reliable Wi-Fi and private corner tables, our informal headquarters while we established more permanent arrangements. I arrived first, ordering coffee and claiming our preferred table away from windows and other patrons. By the time Devin arrived, I had opened the envelope and reviewed the offer 3 times. The details were even more substantial than Whitmore had verbalized. The compensation package included not just salary but significant equity, performance bonuses, and golden parachute provisions ensuring security even if the arrangement didn't work out. Devin slid into the chair across from me, eyes immediately going to the papers. So? It's legitimate. Everything he said, plus more. I pushed the offer across the table. See for yourself. He scanned the document, eyebrows climbing progressively. Higher. This is unprecedented. They're desperate. They're pragmatic, I corrected. The board did the math. Buying us is cheaper than fighting us. So what are you thinking? I sighed, organizing my thoughts. Pros, security, resources, infrastructure we don't have to build, immediate legitimacy in larger markets we haven't penetrated yet. Cons, working for the same company that just tried to destroy your career, dealing with corporate politics again, and Naomi still lurking somewhere in the shadows. Exactly. I tapped the table thoughtfully. Plus the question of whether we'd truly have autonomy to implement our vision, or if we'd gradually get pulled back into their traditional mindset. Devin nodded. The golden handcuffs problem. What would you do? I asked. He considered for a long moment. Honestly? I'd keep building what we've started. We're creating something authentic here. The moment we sign those papers, we're back in someone else's system, playing by rules we didn't write. I smiled, something settling inside me. That's where I'm leaning too. But, he prompted, reading my expression. But I'm not ready to decline yet. This offer gives us leverage, and I intend to use it. For the next 2 days, I consulted with my lawyer, analyzed market positions, and spoke individually with each team member about their preferences. The consensus was surprisingly unified. Everyone preferred continuing our independent path, provided we could ensure stability. The wild card was our clients. Would they stay with us if Vertex officially adopted our remote-first methodology under my leadership? Or was their loyalty tied to our independence? I scheduled confidential conversations with our 3 largest clients, framing the discussion hypothetically to gauge reactions. Eliza Riker of Riker Technical Solutions was characteristically blunt. We left Vertex because of culture, not services. If you go back, no matter what title they give you, you'll eventually be absorbed into their system. We're staying with Adaptive Horizons unless you personally tell us you can't serve us anymore. The others expressed similar sentiments, reinforcing what I was already feeling. Returning to Vertex would be a well-compensated retreat, not an advance. On Thursday, the day before Whitmore's requested decision deadline, I drafted 2 documents. The first was a respectful decline of Vertex's offer, expressing appreciation for the opportunity while firmly establishing Adaptive Horizons' intention to remain independent. The second was more strategic, a proposed partnership agreement outlining how Vertex and Adaptive Horizons could collaborate on certain client categories without competing directly, essentially dividing the market in ways beneficial to both companies. I sent both documents to Whitmore with a brief note requesting a follow-up conversation. His response came within hours, available tomorrow, 9 a.m. My office. That night, I barely slept, mentally rehearsing scenarios and responses. By morning, I felt clear and centered, regardless of outcome. Whitmore greeted me with the same calculated cordiality, though I detected new tension around his eyes. You've considered our offer? I have, I confirmed, taking the offered seat. And I'm declining, with sincere appreciation for the opportunity. He nodded slowly, unsurprised. May I ask why? The terms are extremely favorable. The terms are excellent, I agreed. But ultimately, I believe both organizations are better served by remaining distinct entities with different approaches. Which is why I've proposed the partnership framework. He tapped my second document, already open on the coffee table between us. An interesting proposition. Essentially suggesting we cede the remote-first market segment to you while maintaining traditional services for clients who prefer them. With collaborative protocols for clients requiring both service types, I added. It allows each company to focus on core strengths rather than diluting identities. Whitmore studied me with new intensity. You're not just building a consulting firm, are you? You're creating a proof of concept for an entirely different business philosophy. I smiled. The future of work is changing, Mr. Whitmore. Some companies will adapt naturally, others through acquisition, and some will resist until they become irrelevant. I'm betting Vertex is smart enough to recognize which path offers sustainable growth. And this partnership proposal is your suggested middle path. It's a way for both companies to thrive without destructive competition. Your board gets stabilized revenue and market position. We maintain our independence and methodologies. He considered this expression unreadable. And if we decline the partnership and choose competition instead? Then we compete, I said simply. We've already demonstrated our capability to attract clients and talent. We'll continue doing so. The implicit threat hung between us. Vertex could fight, but it would be costly, with uncertain outcome. Whitmore was silent for nearly a full minute, weighing factors I could only guess at. Finally, he spoke. I'll present both your decision and the partnership proposal to the board today. I suspect they'll have questions about implementation details. I'm available to discuss those questions directly with the board if helpful. He nodded. That might be beneficial. Though I should inform you that Naomi remains influential with several board members. I'd expect nothing less. Successful leadership requires strong relationships. As I stood to leave, Whitmore asked one final question. What would you have done differently, had you been in Naomi's position? I considered carefully before answering. I would have recognized that workplace policies should serve business. Objectives, not personal preferences. And that talent retention sometimes requires letting go of control. His slight smile suggested I'd confirmed something he'd already concluded. 3 days later, I received formal communication from Vertex's board accepting our partnership proposal in principle, with requests for specific clarifications. The tone was businesslike but respectful, a negotiation between equals rather than the cease and desist hostility of weeks earlier. More telling was what wasn't in the letter: no mention of Naomi, no further recruitment attempts, and no power plays. The board had made their calculation and chosen collaboration over confrontation. That afternoon, Devon burst into our temporary office space, face flushed with excitement. "You won't believe what just happened at Vertex." Mass email from HR announcing workplace flexibility initiatives effective immediately. They're walking back every single one of Naomi's restrictions. I smiled. Interesting timing. It gets better, he continued. Rumor from my contact in accounting says Naomi's been put on extended sabbatical for professional development. Corporate speak for reassessment before termination, I finished. The board's testing whether the changes can repair the damage without her presence. That evening, as I worked late finalizing client presentations, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Maya Chambers, I answered. Maya. A voice I recognized immediately. Naomi. I think we should talk. I kept my tone neutral. I'm listening. Not over the phone. In person. There are things you should know about the board's intentions. Classic Naomi, attempting to create anxiety through vague implications of insider knowledge. My schedule is quite full this week, I replied. Perhaps you could outline your concerns briefly? Her frustration vibrated through the phone. This isn't a game, Maya. The board is using you to implement changes they've wanted for months. Once you've done their dirty work, they'll discard you too. Thank you for your concern, I said evenly. But Adaptive Horizons is an independent entity. We're partnering with Vertex, not rejoining it. Partnership? She laughed sharply. Is that what they're calling it? Whitmore's been wanting to restructure the company for years. You're just giving him the excuse. An interesting revelation, if true. I appreciate the insight, Naomi. Was there anything else? Her voice hardened. You think you've won, but you've just entered a game you don't understand. The flexibility initiatives, the sabbatical, it's all theater while they restructure. Dozens of people will lose their jobs in the transition. That gave me pause. Which people, specifically? Support staff, middle management, anyone associated with traditional workplace administration. The remote model doesn't need them. Now I understood her call. Not concern for me or the affected employees, but an attempt to create guilt by association. If layoffs happened during the transition to flexibility, she wanted me feeling responsible. Change always creates disruption, I acknowledged. But preserving outdated systems solely to maintain positions isn't sustainable business practice. Vertex needs to evolve or it will continue losing market share. So cold, she said quietly. I never thought you'd become so calculating. I learned from experience, I replied, letting the implication hang. After disconnecting, I immediately called Whitmore. When he answered, I skipped pleasantries. Is Vertex planning significant layoffs as part of the flexibility transition? A pause. That's a complex question. Certain roles become redundant in a distributed model. Others need expansion. I want transparency about transition plans before we finalize the partnership, I stated firmly. Adaptive Horizons won't be associated with implementation that treats people as disposable. A fair request, he conceded. I'll have the transition committee prepare detailed projections, including retraining options for affected positions. Thank you. I hesitated, then added, Naomi contacted me. She seems to believe these changes were planned before my departure. Whitmore sighed audibly. The board has been discussing modernization for some time, yes. Naomi's restrictive policies accelerated the timeline by demonstrating the concrete costs of resistance. Your success simply provided a clear alternative model. So I was the catalyst, not the cause. Precisely. Change was inevitable. You just showed us the most efficient path. That conversation marked a turning point in my perspective. What I'd viewed as personal victory was actually something larger, being in the right position at the right moment to accelerate an overdue transformation. My small rebellion had become a case study in workplace evolution. Over the next few weeks, several things happened simultaneously. Adaptive Horizons secured permanent office space, ironically, a smaller footprint than traditional companies. Our size would require, since most team members worked remotely. We finalized the partnership agreement with Vertex, creating clear guidelines for client transitions and collaborative protocols. And we hired 3 more former Vertex employees. who approached us directly, expanding our capacity for new business. But the most significant development came from an unexpected source. My phone rang one morning with another unfamiliar number. Maya Chambers. Ms. Chambers, this is Priya Menon, Chief Innovation Officer at Meridian Global. I straightened. Involuntarily. Meridian Global was a Fortune 500 company, exponentially larger than either Adaptive Horizons or Vertex. Good morning, Ms. Menon. How can I help you? I've been following your situation with interest, she said, her voice warm but precise. Particularly your implementation of remote-first methodologies in traditionally office-centric services. Thank you. We found it creates significant advantages in both talent acquisition and service delivery. So our research suggests. Which is why I'm calling. Meridian is evaluating partnership opportunities with firms demonstrating next-generation workplace models. We'd like to discuss potential collaboration on a global scale. My heart raced. But I kept my voice steady. That sounds intriguing. What specifically are you envisioning? Initially, a pilot program applying your methodologies to 3 of our divisions across different markets. If successful, potential expansion company-wide, affecting approximately 30,000 employees. The scale was breathtaking, transforming. Not just one company but potentially creating ripple effects throughout entire industries. I'd be very interested in continuing this conversation, Ms. Menon. Excellent. My assistant will arrange a meeting. One more thing, Ms. Chambers. Yes? I understand Vertex recently offered you a significant compensation increase to return. May I ask why you declined? I considered my answer carefully. Because some opportunities aren't measured in salary alone, but in the chance to create lasting change. Her soft laugh carried genuine appreciation. I believe we'll work well together, Ms. Chambers. That evening, I gathered our core team for dinner at my apartment. As we discussed the Meridian opportunity and its implications, Devin raised his glass in a toast. To Maya, who turned rejection into revolution. I smiled, shaking my head. To all of us, who recognize that our value isn't determined by where we work, but by the work itself. Later, alone after everyone had left, I opened my laptop to check emails one final time before bed. Among them was a message from an unfamiliar address with the subject line, "Perspective from the Other Side." It was from Jeffrey Whitmore's executive assistant, the silver-haired woman who had greeted me at his office. Ms. Chambers, I hope you'll forgive this unusual communication. Mr. Whitmore doesn't know I'm contacting you. I wanted to share something you might find meaningful. After your first meeting, he returned to the office and said something I've never heard from him in 15 years working together: sometimes being proven wrong is the most valuable experience in business. The changes happening at Vertex now aren't just structural, they're philosophical. Your courage created ripples affecting thousands of people who will never know your name, but whose lives will be measurably improved. I thought you should know that. I sat back, a complex mixture of emotions washing through me. Not triumph or vindication, but something quieter and more profound, the recognition that systems change when enough individual voices refuse to accept the status quo. My phone pinged with a text from Devin, just got word from my contact at Vertex. Naomi officially resigned today. Announcement going out tomorrow. I didn't feel the satisfaction I might have expected weeks ago. Instead, I felt something like compassion for someone who had tied her identity so completely to a workplace model that was inexorably fading. I typed a response: end of an era. Beginning of something better. Then I closed my laptop and walked to the window overlooking the city lights. Somewhere out there, Naomi was recalculating her future. Whitmore was navigating institutional evolution. And thousands of employees were discovering that work could happen anywhere inspiration struck, not just under fluorescent lights and watchful eyes. The world hadn't changed overnight. But it had shifted, just enough to create space for new possibilities. All because I'd refused to accept laughter as the final answer to a reasonable request. 6 months later, I stood at the podium of the International Business Innovation Summit, looking out at 500 faces: CEOs, founders, human resource directors, and workplace strategists from 6 continents. The spotlight felt warm against my skin as I adjusted the microphone. 2 years ago, I was reprimanded for taking a client call from my back porch, I began, earning knowing chuckles from the audience. Today, I'm here to discuss how Adaptive Horizons has helped transform workplace policies for organizations representing over 70,000 employees worldwide. The journey from rejected employee to keynote speaker had unfolded with startling velocity. Our partnership with Meridian Global had exceeded all projections, with their pilot program showing a 28% productivity increase across remote divisions. Employee retention improved by 34%, and recruitment costs dropped dramatically as geographic limitations dissolved. The data couldn't be ignored. Traditional companies began approaching us not just for services but for transformation. Consulting. Adaptive Horizons had evolved from a small consultancy to what business publications were calling the standard bearer for workplace revolution. The fundamental mistake traditional leadership makes, I continued, advancing to a slide showing the correlation between autonomy and productivity, is assuming physical presence equals contribution. In reality, we found exactly the opposite. When you trust professionals to manage their environment, they consistently deliver superior results. From the front row, Devin gave me an encouraging nod. Beside him sat our now 20-person leadership team, including 4 former Vertex directors who had joined us after Naomi's departure. The irony wasn't lost on me. We had become the talent magnet that Vertex once was, by embracing precisely what they had initially rejected. But this isn't just about working from home, I emphasized, moving to the core of my presentation. It's about dismantling industrial-age thinking in knowledge economies. It's about recognizing that talent functions best when treated as autonomous partners rather than supervised resources. As I detailed our implementation methodology, I spotted a familiar face in the third row, Jeffrey Whitmore, watching with thoughtful concentration. Our partnership with the restructured Vertex had evolved into a case study in cooperative disruption. They had emerged leaner but more profitable, focusing on client segments that genuinely benefited from traditional approaches while referring others to us. After the presentation and extended Q&A session, I found myself surrounded by business leaders eager to continue the conversation. I addressed their questions patiently until a conference organizer gently extracted me for a scheduled media interview. The interviewer, a sharp-eyed woman from a leading business publication, wasted no time with softballs. "Maya, your rise has been meteoric by any standard. From rejected employee to industry speaker in 18 months. What do you say to critics who suggest this is more about fortunate timing than replicable strategy?" I smiled, appreciating her directness. Timing is certainly a factor in any business success story. But timing alone doesn't create sustained results. What we've built addresses fundamental inefficiencies in traditional workplace models that have been accumulating for decades. The pandemic accelerated awareness, but didn't create the underlying problems. And your former employer? Sources suggest Vertex has stabilized after significant restructuring. Any residual tension there? None whatsoever, I replied honestly. Our partnership has become a model for collaborative market approach. They excel in areas requiring physical presence, we specialize in distributed solutions. Both companies are stronger for the specialization. She nodded, making notes. One final question. You turned down an extremely lucrative offer to return to Vertex in a leadership role. A position that would have given you the power to implement the very changes you advocated for. Many would see that as the obvious victory path. Why choose the harder road? I considered carefully before answering. Because authentic change rarely comes from trying to retrofit new ideas into established systems. Sometimes you need to build from first principles, free from institutional constraints. The harder road offered something more valuable than a title or salary, it offered proof of concept. After the interview, I slipped away from the conference bustle to a quiet balcony overlooking the city. My phone vibrated with dozens of notifications, connection requests, media inquiries, and congratulatory messages from clients. I silenced it temporarily, taking a moment to process the surreal nature of the day. "Quite a view," came a voice behind me. I turned to find Jeffrey Whitmore approaching with 2 coffee cups, offering one to me. "Thank you," I said, accepting it. "I didn't expect to see you here." He smiled slightly. Professional development. Learning from disruption rather than resisting it. A valuable approach. Your presentation was compelling. Particularly the productivity metrics from the Meridian implementation. I nodded. The data speaks for itself. Indeed. He sipped his coffee, gazing out at the skyline. The board is considering spinning off Vertex's remaining traditional services into a separate entity and transitioning the main company to your model. This was significant news, essentially validating our approach at institutional level. That sounds like a strategic move, I replied carefully. It's survival, he corrected. The market has spoken rather definitively. Which brings me to a proposition. Another one? I raised an eyebrow, remembering our previous negotiation. He chuckled. Not recruitment this time. Acquisition. I stilled. You want to acquire Adaptive Horizons? The board believes consolidating our complementary approaches under unified leadership would create exceptional market position. Full operational autonomy for your division, of course. The offer shouldn't have surprised me. Vertex had stabilized but wasn't growing at our rate. Acquisition was a logical strategy from their perspective. I appreciate the interest, I said diplomatically. But Adaptive Horizons isn't currently exploring acquisition opportunities. Whitmore nodded, unsurprised. I expected that response. But I would be remiss in my fiduciary duty not to make the inquiry. Particularly given recent developments. What developments? You haven't heard? He seemed genuinely surprised. Naomi has launched a competing consultancy specializing in accountability-centered workplace solutions. Essentially marketing surveillance as productivity enhancement. I couldn't help but laugh. That sounds perfectly aligned with her management philosophy. Indeed. Though her timing may be unfortunate. The market appears to be moving decisively in your direction. We stood in companionable silence for a moment, an unlikely alliance formed through business evolution. You know, he said finally. In 30 years of corporate leadership, I've never witnessed such a clear case of market vindication. Your instincts were correct when an entire establishment insisted otherwise. That's remarkably rare. Thank you, I replied, genuinely appreciative of the acknowledgement from someone who had once represented the opposition. As Whitmore departed, my phone vibrated again with a notification I couldn't ignore, a message from Priya Menon at Meridian Global, marked urgent. Need to speak immediately. Accelerated implementation. Breakthrough results in Asia Pacific. Division. Board wants to fast-track global rollout. I quickly called her back. Maya, she greeted, excitement evident in her voice. The Singapore results just came in. 41% productivity increase, 17% cost reduction, and employee satisfaction scores at record levels. The board is astonished. That's extraordinary, I replied, mind racing with implications. Even beyond our projections. Exactly. Which is why they've authorized immediate expansion to all divisions worldwide. We're talking 70,000 employees transitioning to your model within 6 months. The scale was breathtaking. That's a very aggressive timeline, Priya. Our current implementation team couldn't manage deployment that rapidly. We understand. That's why the board has approved whatever resources you need. Additional staffing, technology, training, name it. I'll need to consult with my leadership team to develop a realistic scaling plan. Of course. But Maya, her voice took on added significance, this isn't just about Meridian anymore. The board sees this as a market-defining moment. They're prepared to establish a joint venture entity with Adaptive Horizons to offer this implementation model to other multinationals. If you're interested. My pulse quickened. A joint venture with a Fortune 500 company would catapult us beyond consultancy into global influence territory. I'm definitely interested. Let me gather my team and prepare a scaling proposal. Within an hour, I had assembled an emergency strategy session in our conference room. Devon, Isabel from Operations, our Chief Technology Officer Marcus, and our newly hired Director of Implementation, Zara, listened intently as I outlined Meridian's proposal. This changes everything, Marcus said when I finished. We'd need to quadruple our technical infrastructure immediately. Isabel nodded in agreement. And expand the implementation team by at least 15 specialists. The timeline is the biggest challenge, Zara added. 6 months for global rollout is beyond aggressive. We'd need to develop a parallel implementation model. Devon, ever practical, focused on the core question. Can we actually deliver on this scale without compromising quality? I appreciated their candor, no false enthusiasm, just clear-eyed assessment of a transformational opportunity. Those are all valid concerns, I acknowledged. But consider the alternative. If we decline because the scale seems daunting, someone else will step in. Possibly Vertex. Possibly even Naomi's new venture, retrofitting our methods into their framework. Marcus frowned. It's not about declining. It's about setting realistic parameters. Agreed, I said. So let's design those parameters. What would make this possible? For the next 3 hours, we disassembled the challenge into manageable components. Marcus outlined a scalable technology architecture. Isabel developed a phased staffing plan. Zara reconstructed our implementation methodology for parallel deployment. Devon calculated financial requirements and return metrics. By evening, we had the framework of a viable approach, ambitious but not impossible, requiring significant expansion but with manageable risk. It's going to be intense, I concluded, looking around at tired but determined faces. But this is exactly the opportunity we've been building toward. Not just implementing change for one company, but creating a model that transforms how work happens globally. Devon raised a critical point. This will fundamentally change Adaptive Horizons too. We'll go from boutique disruptor to enterprise scale. Operation almost overnight. Some of what makes us special might get diluted in that transition. Only if we let it, I countered. Our principles remain the same, regardless of scale. Trust over surveillance. Results over presence. Autonomy over control. Those don't change whether we're serving 10 clients or 100. The team nodded. In agreement, energy renewing as the vision crystallized. One more thing, I added. I want to implement what we preach during this expansion. No one burns out. No one sacrifices work-life balance to meet artificial deadlines. We scale intelligently, not desperately. Isabel smiled. Leading by example. Revolutionary concept. Exactly. I stood, signaling the meeting's conclusion. Draft your detailed plans by tomorrow afternoon. I'll present our proposal to Meridian's board the following morning. As the team dispersed, Devon remained behind, a thoughtful expression on his face. Something on your mind? I asked. Just processing how far we've come. 6 months ago, we were working from your living room, scraping together client presentations. Now we're discussing global implementation for a Fortune 500 company. I smiled. Vindicating, isn't it? Beyond vindicating, he agreed. But I'm more impressed by what didn't change. You're the same leader now that you were then, focused on the work itself, not the trappings of success. I had an excellent negative example, I replied dryly, thinking of Naomi's fixation on status and control. Speaking of whom, Devon said, checking his phone, you might find this interesting. Just published in Business Insider. He showed me the screen displaying a profile headline, Back to Basics, How Naomi Winters is Championing Traditional Workplace Values in a Remote-Obsessed World. I skimmed the article, noting familiar rhetoric about accountability, tangible collaboration, and leadership presence. Naomi was positioning herself as the champion of traditional values against the tide of workplace evolution, a potentially viable niche, if an increasingly limited one. She's found her market segment, I observed. Those resistant to change will need their position validated. Doesn't it bother you? Devon asked. She's essentially building a business opposing everything we stand for. I considered this. Not really. Market forces will ultimately determine which approach delivers superior results. If anything, the contrast highlights the value of what we're building. The next morning, I presented our implementation proposal to Meridian's executive committee, a comprehensive plan balancing ambitious scaling with realistic timelines. Rather than promising the impossible 6-month global deployment, we outlined a 12-month phased approach with progressive validation metrics at each stage. When I finished, Priya glanced around the boardroom, gauging reactions from her colleagues. The CFO looked cautiously optimistic. The regional directors were nodding thoughtfully. The CEO, a traditionally reserved woman named Eleanor Voss, studied me with penetrating intensity. Ms. Chambers, she finally said, your proposal suggests a timeline twice what we initially specified. It does, I acknowledged without defensiveness. Because we believe in promising what we can deliver with excellence, rather than committing to timelines that would require cutting corners. Transformational change done poorly is worse than no change at all. She held my gaze for a long moment, then smiled slightly. Refreshing. Most consultants would promise anything to secure the contract, then explain delays later. We operate differently, I replied simply. So I see. She turned to her executive team. Thoughts? The CFO spoke first. The phased approach allows for validation before full financial commitment. Prudent risk management. The Asia-Pacific director nodded agreement. And the results from Singapore give us confidence in the methodology. I support proceeding with the extended timeline. One by one, the executives registered support until Eleanor turned back to me with decision made. Adaptive Horizons has proven itself both in results and integrity. We accept your implementation plan and timeline. Legal will prepare the joint venture agreement immediately. Just like that, with characteristic corporate efficiency, the trajectory of both companies was transformed. Within weeks, we had established joint implementation teams, secured expanded office space for our growing staff, and begun the complex process of scaling our methodology for enterprise deployment. The business press took notice, with headlines like Meridian Global bets big on workplace revolution and Adaptive Horizons, from startup to market leader in 18 months. Industry analysts debated whether our approach represented the future of work or merely a pandemic-inspired anomaly. Amidst this external excitement, I remained focused on internal integrity, ensuring our rapid growth didn't compromise the very principles that had made us successful. We implemented strict work-life boundaries for our team, modeled healthy remote practices in our own operations, and continuously refined our methods based on implementation feedback. 3 months. Into the Meridian deployment, I received an unexpected message request on LinkedIn from a name that immediately caught my attention, Naomi Winters. Maya, we should discuss the industry's direction over coffee. Professional courtesy between market players. Naomi, I stared at the message, considering the possible motivations behind this outreach. Professional networking? Competitive? Intelligence gathering? Genuine reconciliation? With Naomi, the surface request always concealed deeper strategy. After deliberation, I accepted, suggesting a neutral location, a quiet cafe midway between our offices. Professional courtesy indeed, though with appropriate boundaries. The meeting was set for the following week. I mentioned it to Devon, who reacted with predictable skepticism. You realize this is reconnaissance, right? She's struggling to gain traction against our model and wants insider perspective. Probably, I agreed. But refusing would appear defensive or petty. Besides, I'm curious to hear how she's positioning traditional methods in a rapidly evolving market. The day of our meeting arrived with unseasonable warmth, suggesting early spring despite the calendar's insistence on winter. I arrived precisely on time to find Naomi already seated at a corner table, impeccably dressed in what I recognized as her external negotiation outfit, conservative but expensive, projecting authority without ostentation. Maya, she greeted, rising slightly as I approached. Thank you for making time. Of course, I replied, settling across from her. Professional courtesy, as you said. A server appeared immediately. Naomi had likely arranged priority attention, another characteristic power move. We ordered coffee, and when privacy resumed, she studied me with that evaluative gaze I remembered well from countless performance reviews. You look well, she observed. Success agrees with you. Thank you. You seem to be building momentum with your new venture as well. A slight tightening around her eyes, my polite acknowledgement wasn't quite accurate, it seemed. Different market segments, she said dismissively. Though that's partly why I wanted to meet. The industry narrative has become unbalanced. I raised an eyebrow. Meaning? The business press has embraced remote work as universally superior, ignoring the very real benefits of traditional workplace structures. It's become challenging to have balanced conversation about appropriate models for different organizational needs. An interesting perspective, containing both legitimate observation and self-serving framing. Markets tend to overcompensate. During paradigm shifts, I acknowledged. The pendulum swings far in reaction to previous limitations before finding equilibrium. She nodded, seemingly appreciative of the non-adversarial response. Exactly. And in that equilibrium, there's room for multiple approaches. Which is why I've been considering a more nuanced positioning for accountability partners. Her company name still made me want to smile, so perfectly aligned with her fundamental belief in supervision as productivity driver. What kind of positioning? I asked. Hybrid models, she explained, leaning forward slightly. Structured flexibility rather than workplace abandonment. Designated collaboration days balanced with remote autonomy. Essentially, the middle path between our current approaches. Now I understood the meeting's purpose. With pure traditional models losing market share, Naomi was pivoting toward the center, hoping to capture organizations hesitant about full remote transition. A thoughtful evolution, I commented neutrally. One that might benefit from collaboration rather than competition, she suggested, reaching the true agenda. Our methodologies could be complementary rather than oppositional. I took a sip of coffee, buying moments to process this unexpected proposal. Naomi was essentially suggesting partnership. The woman who had laughed at my remote work request now wanted to leverage our market position. An interesting suggestion, I replied carefully. Though I'm curious how you envision that operationally, given our fundamentally different perspectives on workplace autonomy. Professional respect can bridge philosophical differences, she countered smoothly. Vertex and Adaptive Horizons manage cooperation successfully. True, though that emerged from mutual benefit rather than strategic initiative. Naomi's expression shifted subtly, more direct, less diplomatic. Let me be candid, Maya. The market is moving decisively toward models you champion. Accountability partners needs alignment with emerging standards to remain viable. You have methodology and market position. We have expertise in structured transition for traditional organizations resistant to abrupt change. The straightforward acknowledgement of her situation was unexpected and somewhat impressive. Naomi had never been one to admit market disadvantage. I appreciate your candor, I said. And I understand the strategic rationale. However, partnership requires aligned values, not just compatible services. Our fundamental belief is that professionals thrive with autonomy and trust. Your brand literally centers accountability and oversight. Her smile tightened slightly. Branding can evolve. But underlying philosophy rarely does, I countered gently. Your Business Insider profile last month emphasized traditional values as your core differentiator. Authentic partnership would require more than strategic repositioning. She studied me for a long moment, calculation visible behind her composed expression. You've become quite the strategist, Maya. A significant evolution from the team manager seeking schedule accommodation. We all evolve through experience, I replied. Some experiences are particularly educational. The subtle reference to her rejection of my remote work request hung between us, acknowledged but not belabored. Indeed. She straightened slightly, shifting to closing mode. Well, I appreciate your perspective. Perhaps formal partnership is premature, but I hope we can maintain professional dialogue as the industry continues developing. Of course. I agreed. Evolution benefits from diverse viewpoints. As we concluded the meeting with practiced cordiality, I recognized something I hadn't anticipated: genuine respect underneath the strategic maneuvering. Naomi had underestimated me, rejected my vision, and subsequently watched that vision transform the industry while her traditional approach struggled for relevance. Yet here she was, adapting rather than clinging to failing orthodoxy. Walking back to my office afterward, I reflected on the symmetry of our situation. 18 months earlier, I had sat in her office seeking flexibility she refused to grant. Today, she had sat across from me seeking alliance I was hesitant to extend. The power dynamic had completely inverted, not through vindictive action, but through market validation of superior approaches. The realization wasn't about personal triumph, but about the inexorable force of functional ideas. Workplace evolution wasn't advancing because of my advocacy or Adaptive Horizons implementation. Methodology. Those were merely vehicles for transformation that had become necessary and inevitable. That evening, I shared the interaction with Devin during our weekly strategy session. Naomi wants partnership? He asked incredulously. The same Naomi who called remote work surrender to mediocrity? Market pressure creates remarkable adaptability, I observed. Though I doubt the philosophical alignment necessary for effective collaboration exists. Devin nodded agreement. Still, it demonstrates how completely the landscape has shifted. When traditional stalwarts start adopting revolutionary language, transformation is truly underway. Exactly. Which means our responsibility increases proportionally. How so? I gestured toward the implementation timeline displayed on our conference room wall, hundreds of teams across dozens of countries transitioning to models we designed. We're no longer just proving concept. We're defining how work happens for tens of thousands of people. If we get this right, we create sustainable structures that balance productivity with well-being. If we compromise for expedience or scale, we risk creating new dysfunctions to replace the old ones. Devin considered this thoughtfully. From rejected request to industry standard. Quite the journey in 18 months. I smiled, remembering Naomi's dismissive laughter when I'd first proposed remote work arrangements, a moment that had seemed like professional defeat but had actually been the catalyst for something far more significant than either of us could have imagined. The journey matters, I agreed. But what we build along the way matters more. 1 year later, I stood on the rooftop garden of Adaptive Horizons' new headquarters, an unconventional space that embodied our workplace philosophy. Unlike traditional corporate offices with assigned desks and corner offices signifying hierarchy, our headquarters functioned as a collaboration hub with flexible spaces designed for purpose rather than status. The evening sun cast long shadows across the city skyline as staff members and their families gathered for our anniversary celebration. Children played in the garden's open areas while team members from across the globe, many meeting in person, for the first time, engaged in animated conversations. Devin approached, carrying 2 glasses of champagne. Quite the view, he said, handing me one. Which view? I asked, gesturing toward the skyline, then to our celebrating team. Both. He smiled. Though I was referring to watching Zara from implementation finally meet Marcus from tech after 18 months of daily video collaboration. They hugged like old friends despite never having been in the same room before. I nodded, warmed by the observation. That's the real revolution, human connection transcending physical proximity. Speaking of revolutions, Devin continued, have you seen the Harvard Business Review article? They're calling it the Chambers Effect, the acceleration of workplace transformation triggered by our Meridian implementation. I groaned slightly. The personalization is ridiculous. This was never about one person's vision. Maybe not. But narratives need protagonists, he shrugged. Better you than Naomi. We both laughed, the mention of my former boss now carrying more irony than resentment. Naomi's company had eventually found its niche, providing transition consulting for traditional organizations taking tentative steps toward flexibility, a smaller market than she'd anticipated, but sustainable within its boundaries. Our laughter was interrupted by the arrival of Priya Menon, now both Meridian Global's Chief Innovation Officer and our joint venture partner. Maya, she greeted warmly. Your team creates extraordinary environments, even for celebrations. This rooftop is perfection. Thank you, I replied. Though I can't take credit. Our space design team insisted that every area, even recreational ones, should enable both community and focused work. Priya nodded appreciatively. The philosophy shows in the results. The latest implementation numbers exceeded even our revised projections. 47,000 employees fully transitioned, 23% average productivity increase, and voluntary retention up 38% company-wide. The financial impact must be substantial, Devon noted. Beyond our most optimistic models, Priya confirmed. Which is partly why I wanted to speak with you tonight. The board has approved Phase 2. I raised an eyebrow. There's a Phase 2? She smiled. Global expansion of the joint venture. They want to establish Adaptive Meridian as a standalone entity specializing in workforce transformation for Fortune 1000 companies. My pulse quickened. That's considerably more ambitious than our current scope. Exponentially so, she agreed. But the market demand is undeniable. We've received inquiries from 37 major corporations since publishing our implementation results. Organizations that previously dismissed remote models are now requesting roadmaps for transition. Devon whistled softly. That would require significant scaling of our current operations. Hence the standalone entity, Priya explained. Properly capitalized, independently staffed, but guided by the methodology and leadership that made the initial implementation successful. She looked at me meaningfully. They want you as CEO, Maya. The offer landed with seismic impact. CEO of a joint venture between our boutique consultancy and a global corporation, a position that would place me at the forefront of workplace transformation worldwide. I'd need to consider all the implications, I said carefully. My commitment to Adaptive Horizons remains primary. Of course, Priya nodded. The board anticipated that response. Their proposal includes Adaptive Horizons maintaining independent operations while you transition to leading the joint venture. Devon would assume CEO responsibilities here with you moving to executive chair position. Devon and I exchanged surprised glances. The proposal had been more thoroughly considered than I'd expected. The formal offer will come next week, Priya continued. But I wanted to provide advance notice. This could significantly accelerate the transformation we've started. After she departed to mingle with other guests, Devon and I moved to a quieter corner of the rooftop. Thoughts? He asked simply. I exhaled slowly. It's both exhilarating and concerning. The opportunity to influence workplace evolution at global scale is compelling. But there's risk in excessive growth and corporate involvement diluting our core principles. True, he acknowledged. Though if anyone can maintain philosophical integrity while scaling, it's you. And what about the suggestion regarding your role? CEO is significantly different from operations director. Devon smiled. I've been doing half the CEO function for months while you've focused on Meridian implementation. The title would just formalize reality. He had a point. As Adaptive Horizons had grown and my responsibilities with the joint venture increased, Devon had naturally assumed greater leadership within our original company. Still, I insisted, this decision affects everyone. We should discuss it with the full leadership team before responding. Agreed. Though tonight is for celebration, not strategy sessions. We rejoined the gathering, where team members were sharing stories of their most unusual remote work locations, mountain cabins, beachfront cottages, grandparents' homes where they could simultaneously care for elderly family members while maintaining professional contributions. Listening to these experiences, I was struck by how thoroughly our workplace model had integrated with life quality. These weren't just employment arrangements, they were frameworks that enabled whole-person thriving. Later that evening, after most guests had departed, I found myself in conversation with Marcus, our chief technology officer who had initially expressed the most concerns about our rapid scaling. Penny, for your thoughts on the Meridian Phase 2 proposition, I ventured, curious about his perspective. He considered thoughtfully. Scale brings both opportunity and risk. The opportunity is obvious, influencing how global workforces function. The risk is subtler, institutional resistance embedding compromises that undermine core principles. Exactly my concern, I nodded. How would you address that risk? Structural safeguards, he replied without hesitation. codified principles that require supermajority approval to modify, implementation methodologies with non-negotiable components, and leadership committed to walking away from lucrative opportunities that demand fundamental compromise. His clarity was refreshing. So you believe it's possible to maintain integrity through structured scale? Not just possible, essential, he emphasized. If we don't scale these models responsibly, someone else will scale inferior versions that preserve the appearance of evolution while maintaining outdated power structures. The market is moving regardless of our participation. Better to shape that movement than observe it. His perspective shifted something in my thinking. Perhaps the choice wasn't between principled smallness and compromised growth, but between influencing large-scale change and abandoning that territory to less transformative approaches. The following week, Meridian's formal offer arrived, comprehensive, generous, and structured to preserve the independence and integrity of both Adaptive Horizons and the new joint venture. After thorough discussion with our leadership team, we developed a counterproposal that strengthened philosophical safeguards while accepting the fundamental framework. Negotiations proceeded with remarkable alignment, resulting in agreement within 3 weeks. The announcement of Adaptive Meridian's formation generated significant business press coverage, with headlines like "Workplace Revolution Goes Mainstream" and "Corporate Giant Embraces Radical Flexibility." My transition to CEO of the joint venture while maintaining executive chair position at Adaptive Horizons created initial challenges, primarily the fundamental limitation of hours in a day. Despite our workplace philosophy minimizing unnecessary meetings, leadership responsibilities at this scale demanded substantial attention. Devon seamlessly stepped into the Adaptive Horizons CEO role, preserving our core culture while implementing subtle improvements I'd overlooked. The original company continued thriving, focusing on mid-market clients while the joint venture targeted enterprise-scale transformations. For months into this new arrangement, I received an unexpected meeting request from Eleanor Voss, Meridian's CEO. Her assistant's message indicated she wished to discuss strategic positioning in response to market developments, corporate speak that could encompass virtually anything. We met in Eleanor's office, a surprisingly modest space given her position atop a Fortune 500 company. Unlike the ostentatious displays common among executives of her stature, her workspace featured practical efficiency with simple elegance. "Maya," she greeted me with characteristic directness. "Thank you for making time. I wanted to discuss an emerging situation before it reaches board level." "Of course," I replied, instantly curious. "What situation?" She handed me a tablet displaying an industry publication. The headline immediately caught my attention: "Workplace Accountability Coalition Forms to Counter Excessive Flexibility Movement." Scanning the article, I noted familiar themes: concerns about collaboration quality, management oversight, and cultural cohesion in remote environments. What surprised me was the coalition membership: 14 major corporations, including 3 direct competitors to Meridian. "They're formalizing opposition," I observed, returning the tablet. Eleanor nodded. "With Naomi Winters as coalition spokesperson, interestingly enough. They're positioning this as correcting workplace fragmentation and restoration of proven methodologies." I couldn't help smiling slightly. Predictable response to paradigm disruption. Established interests organizing to preserve status quo. Predictable but potentially influential, Eleanor countered. Several of these companies have significant market presence and political connections. They're already lobbying for regulatory frameworks around remote work, ostensibly for security and labor protection, but effectively creating barriers to implementation. This was concerning. Regulatory hurdles could substantially slow transformation momentum, particularly internationally, where jurisdiction complexities multiplied challenges. "What's your assessment of their likely impact?" I asked. "Moderate near-term, potentially significant long-term," she replied. "Their narrative is compelling to traditional leaders: preservation of established norms presented as responsible stewardship rather than resistance to change." I considered this thoughtfully. So they're reframing our transformation as reckless disruption rather than evidence-based evolution. Precisely. And leveraging societal anxiety about technological change to bolster their position. She leaned forward slightly. "We need a counter-strategy that addresses legitimate concerns while continuing to advance transformation based on demonstrated outcomes." The conversation continued for over an hour as we analyzed the coalition's likely tactics and developed response approaches. By meeting's end, we had outlined a 3-part strategy: accelerating implementation for companies already committed to transformation, developing enhanced metrics demonstrating tangible benefits beyond productivity, and creating public education. Resources addressing common misconceptions about remote work impacts. As I departed Eleanor's office, my phone buzzed with a notification, a connection request from Naomi Winters with brief message: market positioning aside, professional dialogue remains valuable. Let's discuss coalition perspectives over coffee next week? The timing suggested she'd known about my meeting with Eleanor, which raised questions about information flow within Meridian. I accepted the invitation while making mental note to discuss internal communication protocols at our next executive committee meeting. Our coffee meeting occurred at the same neutral location as our previous encounter, though Naomi's demeanor carried greater confidence this time, the assurance of someone representing collective interests rather than individual enterprise. Maya. She greeted me. Thank you for making time despite our organization's divergent positions. Professional courtesy, I replied, echoing her previous meeting request language. Though I admit curiosity about the coalition's formation. Quite the rapid organization. She smiled slightly. Market responses accelerate when sufficient interests align. The pendulum you referenced in our last conversation has swung too far toward untested models. The coalition simply represents balanced perspective. Interesting characterization, I observed. Particularly given the implementation data from 47,000 employees demonstrating significant productivity and well-being improvements. Metrics reflecting immediate transition enthusiasm, she countered smoothly. Long-term impacts on organizational cohesion, innovation collaboration, and cultural transmission remain concerning. Hence the coalition's emphasis on structured accountability frameworks. The conversation continued in this vein, professionally cordial but fundamentally oppositional. Naomi presented coalition concerns with genuine conviction, not merely strategic positioning. She truly believed that workplace transformation threatened organizational foundations rather than strengthening them. As our meeting concluded, she made an unexpected observation. You know, Maya, despite our philosophical differences, I find myself respecting your consistency. You've built exactly what you advocated for in my office years ago, without compromising core principles despite considerable scale pressure. The acknowledgement caught me by surprise. Thank you. That's deliberately intentional. I imagine so, she nodded. Though I still believe you're wrong about optimal workplace structure, I acknowledge the integrity of your approach. Perhaps. That's why the coalition formed. Your model's success demands organized response rather than dismissive rejection. As I walked back to my office afterward, I reflected on the symmetry of our positions. We had both graduated from individual perspectives to movement leadership, Naomi representing traditional workplace preservation, me advocating transformation at scale. The personal conflict had evolved into philosophical counterpoint with market-wide implications. The Workplace Accountability Coalition represents the first organized resistance to transformation models. I began, outlining what we'd learned about membership, positioning, and potential regulatory initiatives. Priya frowned. Their timing is strategic, just as implementation momentum reaches critical mass. And their messaging is calibrated for executive anxiety, added our communications director, emphasizing risk mitigation rather than overtly opposing change. So how do we respond? Asked Marcus. Technical counterarguments won't address emotional resistance. I nodded agreement. Which is why we need multidimensional approach. First, accelerating implementation with committed organizations to establish irreversible momentum. Second, developing richer metrics beyond productivity to demonstrate holistic organizational benefits. And third, creating educational resources addressing legitimate concerns without validating unfounded fears. The team engaged enthusiastically, each contributing expertise to our response framework. By meeting's end, we had established clear action plans with ownership and timelines. As discussions concluded, I added one final thought. The coalition's formation, while challenging, actually validates our impact. Organized resistance only emerges against meaningful change. Their opposition confirms we're not just implementing temporary accommodations, we're fundamentally reshaping how work happens. Over subsequent months, the workplace transformation landscape evolved into clearly defined perspectives. The Workplace Accountability Coalition advocating for traditional structures with limited flexibility, and our adaptive Meridian implementation methodology promoting trust-based autonomy with structured collaboration protocols. The business press characterized this as philosophical battle, but market choices told a different story. Despite coalition advocacy, implementation requests continued accelerating. Organizations that had initially resisted remote models began requesting transition roadmaps, driven by competitive pressure as early adopters demonstrated substantial advantages in talent acquisition and operational efficiency. 6 months after the coalition's formation, I received invitation to participate in a Harvard Business School panel discussion on workplace evolution. The invitation noted other panelists included Eleanor Voss, two prominent business school professors specializing in organizational design, and, perhaps inevitably, Naomi Winters representing the coalition perspective. The event was structured as academic discourse rather than debate, with each panelist presenting perspective before facilitated discussion. The auditorium was filled with business students, faculty, and industry representatives, a concentrated audience of future workplace shapers. When my turn came to present, I focused on implementation evidence rather than philosophical arguments. Across 73 organizations representing diverse industries and over 120,000 employees, I explained, displaying our consolidated data. We've documented average productivity increases of 26%, voluntary retention improvements of 32%, and recruitment cost reductions averaging 41%. I advanced to the next slide, showing well-being metrics. Perhaps more significantly, employer-reported work-life satisfaction increased by 47%, while stress-related health incidents decreased 29%. These aren't theoretical benefits, they're measured outcomes from real implementation at scale. When Naomi presented the coalition perspective, she acknowledged these metrics while raising longer-term concerns. Short-term productivity gains may mask deeper organizational challenges, she cautioned. Cultural transmission, collaborative innovation, and institutional knowledge preservation all rely on structured interaction patterns that remote models potentially compromise. The subsequent discussion explored these tensions thoughtfully, with professors providing historical context about previous workplace transitions and Eleanor offering enterprise leadership perspective on implementation challenges. As the panel concluded, the moderator posed a final question to all participants: what do you believe the workplace will look like in 10 years? Eleanor answered first, predicting hybrid models with purpose-driven physical presence. The professors suggested industry-specific variation based on task requirements. Naomi advocated for technology-enhanced traditional structures with limited remote flexibility. When my turn came, I considered carefully before responding. I believe we'll stop discussing the workplace as physical location entirely. Organizations will be defined by shared purpose and collaborative methodologies, not geographical co-location. The question won't be where work happens, but how effectively purpose translates into contribution, regardless of setting. Afterward, as panelists gathered in the reception area, Naomi approached me with thoughtful expression. Interesting closing perspective, she observed. Though I question whether human social dynamics will ever fully transcend physical presence. Requirements. Perhaps not entirely, I acknowledged. But necessity drove unprecedented adaptation during the pandemic. Choice will drive even more substantive evolution as organizations discover competitive advantages in flexibility. She smiled slightly. Ever the optimist about human adaptability. Informed optimism, I corrected. Based on implementation. Data rather than theoretical projection. We were interrupted by a group of business students requesting insights about career preparation for evolving workplace models. As Naomi and I found ourselves jointly advising future leaders, despite our philosophical differences, I recognized an important truth: the transformation was larger than either of our perspectives. The workplace revolution wasn't simply remote versus traditional anymore. It had evolved into fundamental reconsideration of how organizations function, how leadership manifests, and how contribution is measured. Both Naomi's coalition and our implementation methodology represented transition positions in longer evolutionary process. Later that evening, as my flight home crossed darkened landscape punctuated by city lights, I reflected on the journey from rejected accommodation request to industry-wide transformation leadership. The path hadn't been linear or predictable. It had emerged from authentic commitment to better possibilities rather than strategic career planning. I opened my laptop to review messages, finding one from an unexpected sender, Jeffrey Whitmore, the Vertex board member who had once attempted to recruit me back. Watched live stream of Harvard panel today. Struck by how thoroughly your alternative approach has become mainstream standard in just 2 years. Market vindication indeed. Vertex board voted yesterday to fully transition remaining operations to your model, final validation of vision we once questioned. Congratulations on not just predicting the future, but creating it. The message carried no request or proposition, simply acknowledgement of transformation's momentum. I closed my laptop, gazing out at the constellation of lights below, each representing thousands of lives navigating their own balance of work and living. The revolution wasn't complete. Coalition resistance would continue. Implementation challenges would emerge. Regulatory frameworks would evolve, sometimes helpfully and sometimes obstructively. But the fundamental direction had been established. Work was becoming something you contributed rather than somewhere you went. Productivity was being measured through results rather than presence. Leadership was evolving from supervision to enablement. And it had all begun with a single request, mockingly rejected but ultimately vindicated beyond anyone's imagination, including my own. As the plane began its descent toward home, I made notes for our next leadership meeting, not about coalition response or implementation metrics, but about preserving purpose through scale. The workplace revolution would ultimately be judged not by how dramatically it changed organizational structures, but by how meaningfully it improved human lives. That was the true measure of transformation, not market position or implementation statistics, but whether people found greater fulfillment through evolution we'd helped initiate. By that standard, we were just beginning the real work, regardless of how far we'd already come. The revolution wasn't just about changing where work happened. It was about reimagining what work could be, a source of contribution without compromise, purpose without sacrifice, achievement without surrender of fundamental well-being. That vision extended far beyond any single company, coalition, or implementation methodology. It represented potential transformation of relationship between human capability and organizational structure, evolution that could recalibrate expectations for generations to come. As wheels touched runway and passengers prepared for disembarkation, I felt renewed clarity about our next chapter. Beyond implementation metrics and coalition response, beyond joint ventures and market positioning, lay the true opportunity, demonstrating that work could enhance life rather than consuming it. That was revolution worth leading, regardless of obstacles or opposition. And it was just beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.